The House of Drear, Chapter 9, Part 1. Thomas was talking to himself in his sleep. He could hear himself. He could feel the shape of his words in his mouth. He became half conscious and recognized the sounds of birds singing in the trees outside the house. There were so many and so loud, they were noisy. But sleep overcame him again. He dreamed of trees and the danger of Mr. Pluto. Later he awoke with a start and sat up on the couch. Clear morning sunlight filled the parlor. Whatever he'd said in his sleep he couldn't remember now. Was it a dream, he wondered? I've forgotten something. Was it a dream I've forgotten? Across the foot of the couch lay his new suit and fresh underwear. There was a note pinned to his shirt from his mother. Thomas read it and laughed. It said, "Thomas, you are to wear these clothes." He recalled the day was Sunday and jumped up to get dressed. "Anyhow," he said out loud, "I can't remember if it was a dream or not. I've got to think about what it is I've forgotten. But not today. No, not today." He hurried to the kitchen, still fumbling with his tie. The table was set. There were glasses filled with juice, but there was no one about, not even his mother. The oven was on. Thomas peeked inside. "Good," he said. "Good. Hoe cake's just waiting. Mama must be missing great-grandmother. It's Sunday for sure." In sunlight, the kitchen looked much like any big kitchen anywhere. There were no shadowed angles to bring out its lopsidedness. It looks almost friendly, Thomas thought. But I know there's a tunnel. I know about slaves hiding and running. He went toward the staircase. There was not a sound from up above, although his mother had to be up, probably his father too. The twins would be sleeping, or he would have heard them. He paused at the mirror next to the front parlor and carefully surveyed himself. My head is too big, he thought. The suit is all right. Everybody will know it is a new suit. I will tell them I got it for my birthday. He straightened his tie. Maybe we'll bring some folks home with us. They will sit in the parlor with Papa. They won't like him at first because he's a teacher, but they'll come because they'll want to know why we are here and living in this house. They'll like him once they hear him talk. It seemed to Thomas that his father talked best on Sunday. He always spoke of history, not only the history of black people, but American Indian history and the history of the Hebrew tribes. Once, when they had a minister back home, he would often stop by on Sunday to listen to Thomas's father and to have a cup of coffee. Thomas felt very, very proud of those times, but usually there were just ordinary people in their house on Sunday. Some neighbors, or his two uncles and their families, who would come one Sunday a month for talk, all the way from Tennessee. "There's no minister any more," he whispered. "I said I wasn't going to think about home. I said I wouldn't." "Folks will come to visit here just like they did at home," he told himself. "I'll have friends like I never had before. You wait and see." At the top of the stairs, Thomas couldn't have been more startled by what he saw. His father sat in his best suit, cross-legged on the floor in the middle of the hallway. His mother kneeled beside him in her gray wool suit and her brand-new white and black straw hat. They were completely silent, and Thomas's father was examining something he held in his palm. Thomas tiptoed up to them and knelt down. "What have you got there?" he asked his father. Mr. Small had 3 metallic objects spread out in his hand. He didn't answer Thomas. Instead, he carefully placed the objects one by one on the floor. "Triangles," Thomas said. "3 of them," said Mrs. Small softly, "and they're exactly alike." "Yes, 3 right triangles," said Mr. Small, as though talking to himself. "Thomas, go to my room. Fetch me my pen on the dresser and a sheet of paper from my briefcase. I have an idea we might be able to understand them better if we diagram them." Thomas went and returned almost at once. Mr. Small laid out the paper beside the triangles. Then he drew on the paper a large triangle that looked the same as those in front of him. "The 2 legs of the triangle, which make the right angle, are wood," he said. "Probably a hardwood, like oak." He drew on the paper, marking each leg of the right angle with a capital W. "The surface of the triangle between the legs must be tin. In any case, it's lightweight and coated with silver paint." He drew the line to mark the hypotenuse, the side opposite the right angle. He then shaded the space between the hypotenuse and the angle and marked it with a capital S to show that it was painted silver. "The angle seems to be real gold. I can't tell for sure." Mr. Small marked it with the G for gold and seemed to be finished. "Wait," he said. Next to the triangle he had drawn, he wrote down each letter, and beside each letter he wrote an explanation of what the letter represented. Now, let's see what we have, he said. You forgot something, Thomas said. He picked up one triangle to show his father. Hardly noticeable was a circle of metal in the wood, where the legs of the triangle joined. Thomas turned the triangle on its opposite side. Protruding was a metal peg about a half an inch long. Ah, you're pretty good, Thomas, said Mr. Small. I'll show the peg with a black dot. I'll show the peg with a black dot. He made a dot on the paper. The completed triangle looked like part of a puzzle. Mr. Small began to arrange the 3 triangles on the floor to see if they fit together in any way. He thought of taking one and laying it over the diagram he had drawn. Thomas picked up one of the other triangles and fitted it next to the one on the diagram, with the wood sides next to each other and the wood angles touching. Then Mr. Small picked up the 3rd triangle they had found. He fitted it next to the one Thomas had placed down, so that all 3 wood angles were touching. If it's a square, there's one missing, Mr. Small said, the top one. Any one of them is missing, said Thomas. I mean, you can move them so that there is always one missing, since there are 3 triangles just alike. It doesn't make any kind of sense, Mr. Small said. Why did they leave just 3 triangles if they are meant to make a square? Clearly, there's a triangle missing. Where did you get these 3? Thomas wanted to know. They were stuck in the door frames on the outside of the 3 bedrooms we occupy, Mrs. Small said. To Thomas, his mother's voice sounded breathless. She's frightened, he thought. She's just scared to death. They weren't there last night. I would have seen them, Thomas said. Then Thomas sat quite still. It struck him why his mother was so afraid. His eyes grew wide and searching. Yes, said Mr. Small, reading his thoughts. Someone walked right in, not making a sound, while we slept. He, or they, came through our locked doors to place these triangles in the walls. A warning, Thomas managed to say. Mr. Pluto's second warning. Warning? Mr. Pluto? His mother said. The first warning was the way he arranged that parlor downstairs, Thomas said. He made it so it was a progression going out the windows and on and on. You're letting your imagination get the best of you, Thomas, she said. You don't know that it was Mr. Pluto who was here last night. It's a warning, I tell you, Thomas said. He means for us to flee south. All at once, Mr. Thomas leaned very close to the paper on which he and Thomas had fitted together the 3 triangles. Thomas, he said. He began to move around the paper, looking at it from all sides. It's an optical illusion. It's a box, true, but the wood legs form a Greek cross. What in the world? Said Mrs. Small. Son, you're pretty good, said his father. I don't know about that parlor, the way it was ranged, being a sign. That might be too much for a man like Mr. Pluto to